Hi, everybody, and welcome back from break. I wanted to create this video as a way to dust your brains off. We haven't talked about these concepts in a while, and so I just wanted to make sure that you feel comfortable and confident walking back into school and remembering where we're at in the unit. So I'm going to make myself a little bit smaller, and I'm just going to go over the learning targets that we have so far completed. So the first one is that I can contrast the teen and adult brain. And we had these two guiding questions. What are the functions of the lobes of my brain? So that outer 2 inches, that cerebral cortex, there's 4 major lobes. And then what are the major differences between the teen and adult brain? So let's go over those lobes. Remember, the frontal lobes of our brain, that's going to be the reasonable, rational part of the brain where we do problem solving. We call this executive function. It's like the boss of the rest of the brain and body. It's where decision making happens. I would say the frontal lobe is what's activated when you're taking a test. It's also a really important part of the brain for emotion control. Okay, then let's just move from the front backwards. After the frontal lobe, we have right underneath our temples, the temporal lobes. That's the really cool one where it processes memories that are related to our senses. It's also short-term storage, short-term memory storage. Okay, then let's move to the top of our head, the parietal lobes, and those are the senses: taste, touch, smell, temperature. All of those things are going to be activated and sensed here up here in the parietal lobe. Finally, we have the occipital lobe in the back of the brain, which is responsible for vision. Now we learned about another part of the brain. If we go deep inside past that cerebral cortex into the middle brain called the midbrain region, we see the limbic system. And so that's all of the colorful items here in the middle of the brain, midbrain. And so we had a mnemonic device to help us to remember those really important structures in the limbic system, HAT HIPPO. But really, the big ones that I need you to remember are the amygdala in that HAT word, the thalamus, and the hippocampus. So hippocampus is our memory storage. That's long-term memory. That's going to be these blue nodules here in the center of the brain. Now remember, the amygdala was really, really important for us to remember. Remember, the amygdala, it's on both sides of the brain and it's kind of shaped like a little almond. And the amygdala is going to be our fight or flight center of the brain. So, using this idea that the amygdala is the fight or flight center of the brain, it's related to our fear responses. We learned, and it's also related to memories related to fear. So, we then learned this has a huge impact on how teens perceive their emotions. We know that teenagers don't have a fully developed frontal lobe. And so, because of that, when a teenager is perceiving emotions on other people's faces, they get it wrong about half of the time. We learned from that study and from your data. A lot of times they were seeing anger in the face of someone who was actually expressing something like fear. And the reason for that is because a teenager is processing emotions in their amygdala, whereas an adult is using the rational, logical part of the brain, the frontal lobe, to process those emotions. So that's the really big takeaway for the teen versus adult brain portion. So now let's talk about that second learning target, which is that you can identify the different parts of your body, specifically the endocrine system, that's responsible for that fight or flight response. We're also going to talk about, like, what is fight or flight? What are the series of events that happen in fight or flight? And we used this model to help us break it down, right? So we learned that we have this sequence of events that takes place when our body thinks it's experiencing something stressful. So it could be something extremely threatening, like a bear, right? That'll trigger this stress response. But we know that in modern times, things like a test and, struggling to pay the rent, those are also stressors that activate that fight or flight response. Big part of the brain that is responsible again for that fight or flight is the amygdala. And the amygdala sets off this series of reactions that ultimately releases hormones in your body. The two big hormones you got to remember, cortisol and adrenaline. They travel through the body via the bloodstream, right? All through your blood vessels and arteries to travel to the important parts of your body that are going to need to be elevated, right? You're going to increase your heart rate. You're going to increase your breathing rate. Your pupils are going to dilate. Not necessary parts of the body like digestion, those are going to shut off. We're going to use all of our energy to be able to either get away from the stressor or fight the stressor. We also learned in some cases we freeze. So if we apply this to our anchoring phenomenon, the mountain lion at Mission Trails, when you see that mountain lion on your hike, you go out of homeostasis. You go out of your stable state. It sends you into that fight or flight response where we saw that sequence of events. The amygdala and the frontal lobe are going to notice the stressor. Oh my God, it's mountain lion. It's going to send a sequence of different glands to be activated, like the pituitary and adrenal gland that are going to release those hormones. Cortisol, adrenaline are now traveling through our blood vessels to help us ultimately get away from that mountain lion. Once we are away from the mountain lion and we're safe, we cannot be permanently in fight or flight. We have to now come back down to a state of homeostasis. So our body activates another part of the nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's essentially going to help the body to get rid of those hormones that helped us be able to get away from the mountain lion, brings us back down to that calm, stable state. Our digestion turns back on, and we're really returning to homeostasis slowly. So then the final component here, our last little day together, we planned an investigation, either an ice water investigation or an exercise investigation, to start to talk about this concept of homeostasis. And that's where we're at today. That's where we're going to jump back in together here. So get your brain ready to go. We're going to start to wrap up this unit here. You've got this. You're amazing.